Hello and welcome to, of course, another movie review on HSG, and as I promised in my last review for Species 1 from 1995, this follow-up is going to be Species 2 from 1998, and as you can tell, I'm recording these reviews back to back. Now, in this movie, and in this review, I'm going to treat it as if you've seen the first movie. So the non-spoiler portion of this video might touch on a couple of things from the first film, because I'm going to take it that you've probably seen that movie. If you haven't, check out 1 and 2, then check out both of my reviews and tell me what you think. So, we have the primary actress returning, as you can tell from the cover art. Some characters do come back, some characters don't. Michael Madsen's back, for instance. Of course, Ben Kingsley isn't. Of course, Alfred Molina isn't. And interestingly, Forrest Whitaker is not back either. That was a good choice, because as great of an actor as he is, as I said in my review for the first movie, he was the worst part of the first film. Not his acting, but the writing of that character. That is not how an empath works. Just leave it out of the script. Thankfully, they did not do that here. However, I'm going to get more into this, of course, in the spoiler talk over here. But without spoiling anything too specific, the primary issue that I had with this second movie is that, apart from the fact that I think it's simply not as good as the first one, it's not bad, but it's definitely not as good, is that much more of the focus of this film is actually not on Sil. It's on a completely different character. And the essential story of this movie, without spoiling, again, specifics, is that an astronaut gets infected by something in space, Venom style from Spider-Man, and then comes back to Earth. And this creates some sexual tension, as of course it would, between this alien and Sil. And the rest is obvious because it's a Species movie. So that is the essential concept. It's an interesting twist to have maybe a similar species to Sil, maybe something new, just because it's two aliens wouldn't necessarily mean they want to copulate, but apparently it does in this movie's universe. It introduces this interesting new dynamic, because instead of her trying to find, the peak male human specimens, she's now trying to go for an alien instead, which could potentially be a significantly more potent combination to have. And as you go through the movie, you realise just how potent it could be, considering the male involved. Now, I'm going to leave it there probably for story talk. But to keep it in the non-spoiler for now, the things that I did and didn't like the most about this movie, the things that I like the most are the practical effects and makeup are still very good. You've still got those H.R. Giger-inspired designs in there, which is of course one of the main selling points of the first movie. You've still got the main actress back, which is great. You've got some of the returning cast, as I said. Although I feel that Michael Madsen is a little bit of a caricature in this movie compared to the first one, almost like he didn't really want to be there. But maybe that's just me. And I like that it keeps the vibe of the first movie. It feels like it was made and developed by the same people. It has a similar look, a similar feel, even some of the same locations, and I like that. It's consistent with the first film. It's not like a completely new team comes in and makes everything look totally different. Sometimes that can work, but sometimes it doesn't. Now, as far as stuff which I did not like as much, I will say I actually don't like how this movie deals with Sil, because she's almost relegated to a supporting character in her own movie, and that's weird. It's almost like going to see something like Tremors and making the whole movie about like a farmer's dog. That's not what I'm here for. So in this movie I get why they did it, but it was strange to me how they kind of diverted the attention away from Sil. Now, there's definitely some spoiler stuff that I want to get into later on, so I think as far as the wrap-up on the non-spoiler side, I would only recommend checking this movie out if you liked the first one and want to continue the story. Because in a similar way to Predator 2 versus Predator 1, I actually don't like Predator 2, but I love Predator. I would probably recommend the second one to people who love the mythology, though, in a similar way to how I love The Thing. I will watch anything related to The Thing because I love it so much. So if you did enjoy Species 1, then yeah, check this one out. If you weren't a fan of the first one, then I think you definitely won't be a fan of this one, because it piles on a thicker layer of cheese, there are more cliches, it is a little bit more over the top as well. The first one is a little bit more emotional, a little bit more grounded, almost more more caring in a weird kind of way in terms of how it deals with the character of a monster. As I said in that review, almost like a Frankenstein thing going on there. This one, it doesn't even attempt that. This one is much more just straight up creature feature, cashing in on, the idea of a mating alien. And, fine, go with it. But it's not as good as the first film, put simply, in my opinion at least. Now, to get more into spoiler talk, of course what I'm referring to with regard to Sil, and again, I know some of you have probably already corrected me down in the comments saying, well, actually, it's not Sil in this movie. Her name is Eve, and it's a different character. I know. I didn't want to spoil that. So I referred to her as Sil anyway. But she's essentially the same character anyway. She's not quite as dark initially, but she gets there for sure. The primary issue that I had with the film, as I said, is that they focus much more on this astronaut than they do on Sil. She's a far more interesting character. We've already got an entire movie to get to know her more, and now she's immediately put on the back burner. That was a weird choice to me, in favour of this, astronaut who isn't particularly interesting to begin with, and doesn't end up any more interesting through the entire film. Plus, at the end of the movie, it almost literally becomes Alien versus Predator, because when they both mate and transform, she becomes the Giga design with the tail and the spines out of her back, etc., which we'd already seen in the first movie, but then he becomes this weird, detached jaw, mandibles, kind of split your face in half Predator, in effect. Oversized, really bad special effects in terms of how he moves. He kind of bobbles across the room toward her. Yeah, I'm not really sure what they were going for there. I mean, I guess they had to do some kind of effect, but it definitely doesn't hold up compared to the first movie. There are some effects in this which are good. When all of his offspring are kind of going up in the cocoons, that's pretty good. Some of the effects are good, and even some of the CGI holds up. When he actually shoots himself in the head and his head regrows, for 90s CGI, it actually doesn't look bad. It could do with a bit more shading, a bit more texture on the, the muscle and the skull and everything, but it got the point across, and it was pretty cool. Plus, it was a lingering scene. It rotates all the way around his head. It doesn't just quickly cut away to save itself. So I embrace the fact that they did really try. They clearly were invested in the film. It wasn't just a cash grab, but there were a number of choices in there which I didn't really like. As I said, Michael Madsen seems a little bit disconnected in this movie, even though they're really pushing him to be the action lead of it. And Sil just isn't as interesting because she's not allowed to be. Now, one of the questions that I have about this film, and again, this may be answered in a subsequent sequel, which I haven't watched yet, at least at the time of releasing this review, but something I found kind of strange is, of course, in the end of the first film, a piece of Sil is left over, and the rat drags it away, a tentacle. In this movie, when the scientist is looking at the blood, and the blood falls on the floor, it goes everywhere, starts moving across the floor, The Thing style, and then it goes into the wall. Then when the scientist goes over to inspect it, and like any true scientist does, bends over and sticks his fingers in it. I mean, I half expected him to taste it, but suddenly a hand comes through the wall, first movie style, and rips his guts out. Fair enough. But then, when we go through the wall, it's shown as being Sil, in her true form. Or is that supposed to be Eve? I don't really get what that was supposed to mean. Was that supposed to be the astronaut punching his fist through the wall? Because unless, again, I missed something, it didn't look like him. And it certainly didn't look like the thing that he becomes at the end of the movie. So I was kind of thinking for a moment, is Eve going to be in the cell? And then is that thing that punched through the wall going to be the Sil that came from the rat at the end of the first movie? Now, that may be the case, and that may come back in the third or fourth or whatever movie, because, as I said, I haven't watched them yet. But I found that an interesting choice, because I either thought, well, they're going to bring back the first movie Sil, and she's going to fight Eve. That would have been a far more interesting fight for a start than having this astronaut who we don't really care about. Secondly, though, I thought, well, is that supposed to be Eve? Has she somehow got out of the cell, killed this guy, and then got back in the cell? But that didn't seem to have happened either, so the only conclusion that I could come to is that that is the rat Sil from the end of the first movie, but they never even come back to it that I could notice. So that was kind of a weird moment for me, almost like a throwaway scene, in fact. Now, in terms of other issues that I had, I don't think there are many. I definitely don't think that the movie is as good as the first one. It embraces the schlock a lot more, even though you've still got some great characters in there, Cromwell as the father. But I don't know, there's just something about this movie which it almost doesn't feel as authentic. And that sounds very insulting to the people who made the film, but I don't mean it to. It's almost like everyone was less bothered about this movie. All of the actors feel like they kind of don't really want to be there. The sets, the scenes, the effects, although, as I said, the makeup and that is good, but it just doesn't feel like it was done with as much care. And it's almost like this second movie just embraced the cheese more, with that weird colonel with the scarred eye who looks like the Kingpin from Spider-Man. He had no place in the first movie, and that was good because he wasn't in there. In this movie, he feels somehow perfect, and that, to me, kind of indicates that, yeah, this is more schlocky. I'm just not as much of a fan of that, and the reason why is because as much as I love a good B-movie, the first movie set the bar higher than that. So to me, this would almost be like if Aliens was what it was, but then if Alien was what it was, and then Aliens was much more campy. To me, that wouldn't have worked either. Or if Terminator 1 was dead serious, and then imagine if Terminator 2 was actually like Terminator 3, where it goes full-on self-parody. That wouldn't have worked. So to me, this kind of feels like they did that with this film. So, as I said earlier on in the review, I would recommend this movie in the exact same way as Predator 2. If you like the first one, check out the second one. If you already didn't like the first one, you definitely won't like this one, because it doesn't give you anything new to like it for. Overall, though, that's it for my thoughts. Of course, I would love to hear your thoughts down below, especially if you're maybe like a long-term Species fan. I know that a series like Species, in a similar way to Tremors and some others, even though the sequels get basically progressively worse over time, there are still people who love them all. And, you know, more power to you. I'm not that kind of person. For me to support something, it needs to maintain a certain standard for me, for the most part, with very few exceptions. So overall, that's it for my thoughts. Tell me yours down below, and of course, stick around on the channel for more, and chances are I will probably review more Species movies in the future on the channel. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.